Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Paul Sommers, and as many have said, it is truly an honor to be with you, and more than a little bit scary. The imagery and the poetry of the scripture writers is in full force today. Wolves and lambs lying together, cows and foxes eating together, babies dancing on the nest of vipers, a man in camel hair loins, people called brood of vipers who will burn in unquenchable fire. So much to work with, and honestly, I've struggled with this homily. The readings messed with me, which I suppose is a good thing, unless of course you have a deadline to give a homily on a certain date and time. And as many of you know, I work as an educator. Teachers are encouraged to use as many tools in our toolbox to help us. I want to share with you a new one that I recently learned at a racial equity training. It helped me write this homily. The presenter at the training made the following recommendation. When you enter a room of people, be sure to check your BS at the door. My BS, my belief system. He didn't mean check it like a coat at a restaurant, but rather check in with it, own it, be aware of how it shapes what I see and hear. And it informs my beliefs not only about race, but about gender, age, culture, and simple things like food, and yes, my theology. Whether I'm aware of it, my BS colors how I experience the world. So for better or worse, today you get my BS. BS number 1. I've been struggling with the overly human-centeredness of our faith. The word became flesh. Usually understood to mean human flesh. Jesus, the one whose coming we again prepare for this Advent season. Certainly, the word was flesh and not humans since the beginning of time. And while there is so much I love about the Jesus story, I have wondered how much damage to our non-human world has been made as a result of theologies that put humans at the apex of creation. American writer and satirist Mark Twain wrote a piece based on Isaiah's reading. He writes of an experiment. In an hour, I taught a cat and a dog to be friends. I put them in a cage. And in another hour, I taught them to be friends with a rabbit. And in the course of 2 days, I was able to have a fox, a goose, a squirrel, and some doves. Finally, a monkey. And they lived in peace, even affectionately. In another cage, Twain writes, I confined an Irish Catholic from Tipperary. And as soon as he seemed tame, I added a Scotch Presbyterian from Aberdeen. Next, a Turk and a Greek Christian, an Armenian, a Methodist, a Buddhist, a Brahmin, and finally, a Salvation Army colonel. And then I stayed awake for 2 whole days. When I came back to note the results, the cage of the higher animals was all right, but in the other, there was but a chaos of gory odds and ends, of turbans and fezzes and plaids and bones. Not a specimen was left alive. These reasoning animals had disagreed on a theological detail and carried it to a higher matter, or a higher court. I think one reason I struggle with the Isaiah reading is that for me it's backwards. It's easier for me to believe that the wolf and the lamb can live together than it is for me to believe we can cross the chasm that divides rich and poor, blue and red. The gulf that has people openly support putting children in cages on our border, while others protest in the wilderness, and while most honestly remain silent. From this lens, it makes total sense that God with us, Emmanuel, needs to come in human form. For it is only we humans who have forgotten the original instructions that we are all related, that we need each other. My Lakota friend Francis spoke with my class this week. He used the word "Midakuye Wasim." We are all related. He looked out to the students and he said, "Midakuye Wasim." all my relatives. Francis then went ahead and looked out the window and pointed to the trees and the animals and said, all my relatives. When we say all God's people, does your belief system, your BS, include cobras, foxes, vipers? How can Jesus' coming invite you back to that circle? BS number 2, I have a superpower. I'm almost deaf in my left ear, and my right ear wears an aid. And as many in the community who also wear aids will attest, what you say is never quite as funny as what we hear you say. It's interesting not to trust what you hear. Even more interesting to teach yourself to hear differently, to read more attentively, to see details that you might have missed previously. I hear with my eyes. I find myself focusing on a single word or phrase, like the song we just sang, God, let me see your kindness. Without the words to see, I hear, God, let me be your kindness. I kind of like that change, so I sing it quietly. Matthew writes in the gospel, make straight all paths. My superpower honed in on the word straight. Understood one way, I get it. I need to keep God at the center of my being. Understood another, there's only one way to God, the straight way. The damage of a single path, a single narrative, a single story that leads to the results of Twain's experiment. I'm on the straight path. You're not. What if Matthew had written, make curvy the way to God, make messy the way to God, make queer the way to God? What if he had written, make hairy the way to God, or feathery? What about make broken the way to God? Do any of these words invite you to find God with a wider, more open heart? Draw you back to the original instructions. We're all related. BS number 3. From the gospel of BS number 3. I'm tired of a wrathful God. From the gospel, Matthew writes, when John saw that many of the Pharisees and Sadducees were coming for baptism, he said to them, you brood of vipers, who warned you from the coming wrath? Give some evidence you mean to reform. I wonder who in Twain's experiment quoted this text before the fight that followed. And I sometimes find myself playing out that judgment role when I go after students who test limits daily, hourly, by the minute, again and again. And instead of giving them that teacher look, and I know many of you know what that is, or worse, using righteous anger, I responded with compassion. What then? For who truly repents after being called a viper? My challenge, and maybe all of our challenges, is how to speak truth with compassion, with anger, righteous anger, that gives a chance for our shared humanity to be found, where we can find ways to explore our relatedness. And BS number 4, my last one. I love Advent. I love the O come Emmanuel. I love the part where we say, I ransom my head, my heart, my hands, my eyes. Lord God, let me see your kindness and let me be your kindness. I love move beyond our fears, beyond our walls, because I think Jesus' birth and life is about waking us up, inviting us back to do the work that brings us back to the circle. Our theme this year is stillness and action, cultivating hope. Today, Thomas Merton tells us that there is no second part, action, without contemplation. And he challenges us. The person who attempts to act and do things for others or for a world without deepening their own self-understanding, freedom, integrity, capacity to love will not have anything to give others. So we have these weeks of waiting and preparation to check in with our belief system, our own BS. Time to examine how our BS moves us closer to our relatedness, and where or how in our BS we're separated from our original instructions. How will the coming of Emmanuel invite you back to that circle of relatedness, the circle of Mitakuye Owasa? Amen.